Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 39th episode, our target is The Muppet Christmas Carol, produced by Walt Disney Pictures and Jim Henson Productions, and distributed by Buena Vista Pictures Distribution. Following Jim Henson's death on May 16, 1990, a talent agent named Bill Haber approached Jim Henson's son, Brian Henson, with the idea of doing an adaptation, stating, "Christmas Carol is the greatest story of all time. You should do that." Later informing Brian Henson that he had sold the idea to ABC for a television film. Jerry Joel, a longtime Muppet writer, was hired to write the script and decided to make Gonzo a stand-in for the author of the original novel, Charles Dickens, as to remain faithful to the original, with Rizzo the Rat serving as his companion. Known Muppet characters were originally planned for the Ghosts of Christmas, but was later changed to be brand new characters. For the Ghost of Christmas Past, Kermit's nephew, Robin the Frog, was suggested, as well as Scooter. For the Ghost of Christmas Present, Miss Piggy and Gonzo were suggested, before it was decided that he would be Charles Dickens. And for the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, Animal was suggested. After the script was submitted for approval by ABC, Walt Disney Pictures offered to purchase the script for a future film rather than a television release. When Henson offered the role of Scrooge to Michael Caine, he said, "I'm going to play this movie like I'm working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. I will never wink, I will never do anything Muppety. I am going to play Scrooge as if it is an utterly dramatic role and there are no puppets around me." Interestingly, the song When Love Is Gone was fully filmed but was cut from the theatrical release by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who argued that the song would not appeal to younger viewers. However, if you want to watch the full cut, it is the edition on many DVDs, as well as being available on Disney Plus if you first go to the Extras tab and select the full-length version, which I recommend you do. The film released on December 11, 1992, and made $27.2 million on a budget of $12 million. The director was Brian Henson, and the screenplay was by Jerry Joel. It was based on The Muppet Show by Jim Henson and A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. The producers were Brian Henson and Martin G. Baker. The cinematography was by John Fenner, and the editing was by Michael Jablow. The score was composed by Miles Goodman, and the songs were written by Paul Williams. The cast includes Michael Caine, Steve McIntosh, Meredith Braun, and Robin Weaver. The Muppet performers include Dave Goelz, Steve Whitmire, Frank Oz, Jerry Nelson, David Rudman, Louise Gold, Karen Prell, Rob Teigener, William Todd Jones, Donald Austin, Mike Quinn, Jessica Fox, and David Shaw Parker. The film received mostly favorable reviews, with many considering it one of the best, if not the best, Muppet film. This was the first Muppet film following the deaths of Muppet creator Jim Henson and longtime Muppet performer Richard Hunt. The film is dedicated to both. The film follows a typical A Christmas Story, with Ebenezer Scrooge being a rich but hateful man who doesn't waste a penny on anything he doesn't deem absolutely necessary. Gonzo, portraying Charles Dickens, as well as Rizzo the Rat, helps narrate the story along. On Christmas Eve, Scrooge's employee, Bob Cratchit, portrayed by Kermit the Frog, requests Christmas Day off work, to which Scrooge reluctantly gives, given that all the other businesses will be closed that day and there won't be any work to do anyhow. Scrooge also dismisses two men, portrayed by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker, collecting money for charity, and rejects his nephew Fred's invitation to Christmas dinner. That night, Scrooge sits at home when he is met by the ghosts of his old business partners, Jacob and Robert Marley, portrayed by Statler and Waldorf, who are wrapped in chains. They warn him to be gone with his selfish ways, lest he should face the same fate as them, and tells him that he will encounter 3 more spirits that night. The Ghost of Christmas Past is the first to arrive, who shows Scrooge his childhood spent working on Christmas with his headmaster, portrayed by Sam the Eagle. The spirit then shows Scrooge at his first job, employed by Fozziwig, portrayed by Fozzie Bear, where he meets Belle at a Christmas party. Finally, the spirit shows Belle canceling their wedding, for Scrooge has chosen money over her. The ghost of Christmas Present then shows Scrooge the joys of Christmas Day, and they visit Fred's house, where he and his guests make fun of Scrooge for his behavior. Finally, the two go to Bob Cratchit's house, where his family, despite being in poor health and low income, are thankful and full of joy for Christmas Day, even Tiny Tim, who is very ill. The ghost of Christmas Present then dies, leaving Scrooge with the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. Silent, the spirit shows Scrooge men laughing at the death of someone, and others having stolen the dead man's things and selling them. Scrooge then sees that Tiny Tim has died, leaving the Cratchit family heartbroken on Christmas. Finally, the spirit shows Scrooge that it was Scrooge who died and was being laughed at, to which Scrooge promises to change his ways and avoid these terrible futures from coming. He awakes the next day to find it Christmas, and he gives money to the charity, buys the largest turkey they have, and invites the town to have a huge feast at Bob Cratchit's house, where he raises Bob's salary and pays off the mortgage to his house. Gonzo then informs the audience that Scrooge's change of heart changed the way the future played out. To begin, let's discuss Scrooge himself and the A Christmas Carol adaptation. Now, by and large, this seems to be a pretty direct and accurate recreation of A Christmas Carol. Granted, I haven't read the original novel. It at very least follows the same general plot that most adaptations seems to follow. What this ultimately means is that it more so matters how well it handles the specific elements to really sell the story, because, as we all know, A Christmas Carol is one of the best Christmas stories ever told. Firstly, though this goes without saying, Michael Caine makes for a great Scrooge, displaying perfectly both his awfulness in the beginning and his earnestness in the ending. So, just like the spirits that whisk away Scrooge, I'll be taking you through the past, present, and future scenes and giving my opinion on them. Firstly, the ghost of Christmas Present is simultaneously off-putting and at ease. I think the decision to make new characters for the ghosts was a really great idea, as we'll see for the others as well. Anyhow, the ghost shows Scrooge's childhood in a really sweet scene of Scrooge remembering his childhood friends. It's also really sad, though, to see that Scrooge also saw Christmas as just another day to work, and loathed his peers who spent the day messing around. We then see Scrooge at his employer's Christmas party, where he meets Belle, who he falls in love with. The Christmas party is a pretty fun scene, with a lot of Muppet cameos, such as the Electric Mayhem, though it is rather disappointing that they didn't sing a song. Finally, we are shown when Belle breaks up with Scrooge after he becomes fixated on wealth. I feel like this part isn't that well fleshed out. Belle is barely ever shown, and the scene itself is rather short and falls victim to telling and not showing Scrooge's need for wealth. Even with the deleted song added in, the scene is still short and needed more setup, if you ask me, though it is still better watching the full uncut scene. From there, we meet the ghost of Christmas Present, who is very jolly and he's really fun to watch, with a lot of really good jokes. I also enjoy how he has the ability to be deadly serious with Scrooge when needed, best shown in his final scene before he dies. Anyhow, the spirit first shows Scrooge the streets on Christmas and everyone being joyful in a pretty good song. We then see Scrooge's nephew, Fred's house, where he is hosting his Christmas party in what is easily one of my favorite scenes. Scrooge becomes so invested and joyful at their party game that he tries to join in, despite being unable to interact with them, and to see him become so utterly heartbroken when they insult him, but unable to speak against it because they are completely right, is a great scene. Scrooge is then shown his employee Bob Cratchit's house, where he and his family enjoy a modest meal and are very grateful despite their dire circumstances, especially when it comes to their youngest son, Tiny Tim. This is another pretty great scene, with the Cratchits really showing their gratefulness despite their lack of wealth and fortune, but how Scrooge feels bad because he could so easily make their lives better, made even worse by the fact that they toast to Scrooge's health. The ghost of Christmas Present then dies, and Scrooge is left to face the consequences of his actions with the ghost of Christmas Yet to Come. The ghost of Christmas Yet to Come has a great design, being not quite human and not quite Muppet, and never speaking a word, amplified by Rizzo and Gonzo leaving, stating, "You're on your own, folks." The spirit shows Scrooge the laughter of townsfolk at the expense of a recently deceased man. It is extremely odd to me that they keep it a secret who the dead man is, I feel like even if you've never seen A Christmas Carol before, you could easily interpret that it is Scrooge whom everyone is laughing at the demise of. Regardless, the scenes are still good, but it was an odd choice in my opinion to present it in that way. Nonetheless, we are also shown the death of Tiny Tim, which is shockingly tragic and sad to see given that Tiny Tim has been replaced by a small frog puppet. Finally, Scrooge being shown his grave is possibly the best out of all of these. Scrooge shows his change and begs for the spirit's forgiveness, and begs him to tell if the future is able to be changed. Scrooge then awakens on Christmas Day and changes his ways and saves his quality as a human being and Tiny Tim's life, improving everyone's life in the process. Overall, a pretty good adaptation all around. Not everything is fleshed out in its entirety, but it still does a more than serviceable job telling the story. Now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Muppet side of things. It is the Muppet Christmas Carol, after all. Firstly, I really like the idea of having Gonzo narrate by being Charles Dickens, the author of the original novel, and having Rizzo hang out with him is another great idea. Definitely an underrated Muppet duo. However, the execution of this is lacking, I find. Or rather, quite the opposite, actually. I think Gonzo and Rizzo interrupt far too often, and not always with the most humorous moments. Don't get me wrong, they definitely have their funny moments, but I think there's simply too many moments when the story is trying to progress, but gets stalled by the two, and destroys the mood oftentimes. As stated, I do really like the characters, and they have their moments, so there's definitely worse ways to interrupt your story, but at the end of the day, it's still an interruption, and I think their scenes definitely should have been shortened for the sake of the story. That's pretty much my only complaint with the Muppets, luckily. From there, we have Kermit and Miss Piggy as the Cratchits, which is a great and charming choice, especially coming off the heels of Kermit and Piggy's marriage in The Muppets Take Manhattan. To now see them playing a married couple is great. Kermit could have so easily been made Scrooge, but I think Bob Cratchit was a much better choice. Also worth noting is the loss of Jim Henson, who is obviously the creator of the Muppets, but also the voice of Kermit. All in all, I think Jim Henson's legacy and creation was treated with much care and respect. Kermit's new voice, while slightly noticeable, is carried on greatly by Steve Whitmire. Overall, Kermit and Piggy are on great display here. Also, it's great to see Robin the Frog as Tiny Tim, and all of Kermit and Piggy's family are pretty fun actually. I love the inclusion of Statler and Waldorf by splitting the role of Jacob Marley into Jacob and Robert Marley. Having Scrooge's old business partners be the heckling duo is perfect. From there, the roles are much more cameos rather than character roles, but they're still welcome inclusions. Dr. Bunsen, Honeydew, and Beaker are pretty inspired choices for the charity workers, who visit Scrooge and play a nice role in the finale. Sam the Eagle is pretty fun as Scrooge's old headmaster, and Fozzie Bear is great as Scrooge's old employer. In fact, I love Fozziewig's party scene a lot for the cameos. We see Statler and Waldorf again, we see Fozzie's mom, who's hilarious, there's Ralph the dog, Swedish Chef, and the Electric Mayhem. On top of that, the streets of London are populated by various fun Muppets. These are all really fun inclusions, and I mentioned that I liked how the ghosts were original characters. But at the same time, especially with how it relates to Gonzo and Rizzo, I feel like this film makes for a great Christmas Carol adaptation, but not so much a great Muppet film, which is very conflicting to me. But more about that in the conclusion. In the end, the Muppets are fun, and any excuse to see them, with a few exceptions in the form of interruptions, is very welcome. That finally leaves us with the songs. These are always the most difficult sections because there is oftentimes no official list for the songs, and I really have to go off of instinct. This problem is made much harder in this case because there are 7 songs present in the film, but then there's also the song When Love Is Gone, which was cut from the theatrical cut, but was still recorded and filmed. However, there's also Room in Your Heart and Chairman of the Board, which were recorded but never filmed, so that puts me in a difficult spot. I think, for the sake of being thorough, I'll include them all. Before we start, however, I want to shout out the YouTube channel I found called Cartoonoholic, which made really great animatics of the 2 songs that were never filmed. Now, I actually really enjoy every song on this list, which I think is the first for the Muppet films, where there is usually at least one song I don't care for. Still an insanely great track record, though. In 10th place is Chairman of the Board, which is still pretty good, but mostly for what it brings to the story rather than musically. It's not bad musically, but I mostly get enjoyment out of Sam the Eagle lecturing Scrooge in a way that formed part of why Scrooge became the person he did. In 9th place is When Love Is Found, which is a nice way to end the film, but is rather short and repetitive to really make a strong running. In 8th place is the other never filmed song, Room in Your Heart, which I believe is the only song by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker in these films. Anyhow, a pretty fun song with the occasional really good part. Again, it is a bit repetitive on top of not being all that essential to the plot, making a rather bad running in the ranking. Still good though. In 7th place, Bless Us All, which doesn't work all that notably musically, but it is still a really sweet way of conveying the Cratchits' thankfulness, even in their current situation, and does an especially good job at making us care about Tiny Tim. In 6th place is Marley and Marley, which is a really great song by Statler and Waldorf. Very fun and equally haunting as they tell Scrooge of his ultimate fate if he doesn't change his ways. In 5th place, Thankful Heart, sung by Scrooge after waking up on Christmas Day and declaring his new take on life. In 4th place, The Love Is Gone, a really important part of the film that I don't understand why it was cut. It gives a really important look into why Belle left Scrooge and current Scrooge's regret at his past. Still not the complete story like I mentioned earlier, but it is definitely a necessary part of it. Scrooge singing along at the end only to have to stop because he starts crying, though, is crazy sad to watch. It's very interesting that Belle never shows up again, but I think it actually works better that way, as I think it shows that Scrooge, despite his redemption and whatnot, which is still great by the way, won't fully undo his past actions, and gives an important message about learning your lessons sooner rather than later. In 3rd place, It Feels Like Christmas, sung by the joyous Ghost of Christmas Present, as he shows Scrooge the wonderful Christmas day. Really sweet lyrics and imagery, and Scrooge's shell slowly cracking over the course of it is really interesting to watch. In 2nd place, Scrooge, which is a fantastic way to open the film. Really catchy with a lot of fun lyrics matching a really fun tune. But in 1st place has to be One More Sleep Till Christmas, which, apart from a weird interruption to go sledding, is pretty much perfect. The song beginning with Kermit and his coworkers cleaning up after getting Scrooge to give them the day off is a great start, all the way to the end with Kermit alone watching the full moon in a really great scene. The music and lyrics are equally jolly and somber, but in a good way, making it my favorite song in this film filled with great songs. I give The Muppet Christmas Carol a 9 out of 10 for being a pretty great movie. I'm a bit conflicted with this one, to be honest. I actually did something I've never done before for one of these reviews. I rewatched the film before writing the script for this video, just to see if I was missing something that everyone else seems to really enjoy about this one. I think it makes for a great Christmas Carol adaptation, and maybe even the best one, but I don't understand when people say it's one of the best Muppet films. I find it to be quite lacking in those areas, quite frankly. And even when it gets into the Muppetiness of it all, it can come at the cost of the story, such as with Gonzo and Rizzo's interactions. This all results in me feeling like it's a great Christmas Carol movie, but a rather lacking Muppet movie. In the end, however, it's still a great film, and I can't recommend it enough. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.